folks, this is Chronic Fishing. I'm Todd Chronic. Thanks for tuning in. Alright guys, I was in a tackle store the other day. There was this gentleman walking down the aisle. He's looking for jigs. We had 20 foot aisle just full of jigs, top to bottom, all different colors, sizes, different names, and he was really confused, and I kind of felt bad for him. He didn't know, he wasn't sure what to buy. So I thought, man, what an opportunity, something that I take for granted sometimes, how confusing this can be. So just a quick video, talk about some basic jigs and how you might could choose one or choose a style of jig for your next fishing trip. So real quick, 4 types of jigs: finesse jigs, casting jigs, flipping and pitching jigs, and swim jigs. So from the camera shot, they all kind of look the same. So let me just give you some quick details. Finesse jig, as you can see, it's got a much smaller profile. It comes with a light wire hook, and generally you're going to be a 1/4 ounce or less. One of my favorite sizes is 3/16. Seems to work for a lot of situations that I use a finesse jig in. Finesse jig is usually going to be clear water situations, a lot of times in deep water situations. Because of that light wire hook, you're able to penetrate a fish's mouth deep and with light line. So finesse jig is very important in certain situations. Here we got our casting jig. Casting jig is going to be between the finesse and the flipping jig. Got kind of a medium gauge wire hook. Generally they're going to be anywhere from 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce. You can go up to a 3/4 ounce if you want, depending on the situation, how deep you're fishing. But as a general rule, 3/8 and 1/2 ounce are your basic sizes. This size of this hook, the gauge of the steel, is going to be heavier than a finesse jig but lighter than a flipping jig. Allows you to set the hook on 12, 14, 17 pound test line fairly well to get a good hook set, and you're fishing this jig like you would a worm, where you're just making cast. Flipping and pitching jig, this is where the big stuff comes up. This is where you're dealing with a heavy gauge steel hook. These are made to withstand your heavy lines, 20, 25, maybe even your 45, 60 pound braid. So these are equipped to handle a lot of power on short hook sets. Very important. You try to do that with a finesse jig or a casting jig, in many cases you're going to straighten the hook out, bend the hook, and lose a fish. Our last jig here is one of my favorites, the swim jig. If you'll notice, it's got a nice tapered head, allows that head to come through the grass and vegetation very nicely. My 2 favorite sizes, 1/4 ounce, 3/8. Very rare I have to change from that. And so they're real simple, guys. Finesse jig, casting jig, flipping and pitching jig, and swim jigs. 4 basic styles of jigs, and it's not too complicated. And that's just wanted to clear that up for a lot of you guys that that gets overwhelmed with this stuff, and it's easy to do. All right, folks, we got jigs down. We got 4 basic types: finesse, casting, flipping, pitching, and your swim jigs. Now let's talk trailers. Again, it's real simple. It's not complicated. My finesse jig, almost always use the old style pork chunk. Looks like they call it a frog pork chunk. I use the tiny ones, the real small ones, and I like to keep that bait nice and compact. That's the whole idea of the finesse jig. So that's what I use on a finesse jig. When it comes to the casting jig, I almost always use the same type of chunk, the little bit larger size. Some of you may remember the old Uncle Josh number 11. That's about the size of this, except now they're plastic, so you don't have to worry about keeping them wet all day. I'll generally use that on a casting jig also. Reason is that particular jig or type of trailer will allow the jig to fall and get to the bottom rather quickly, which is what I want to do, and that's where I want to fish a casting jig. All right, here's where it gets a little bit more entailed. Many times I will go to a twin tail trailer. You see how this little twin tail is? My favorite color on a jig is black and blue. It works in many situations, not just dirty water. It will work in clear water too, but I really like the tail action of a twin tail. Also, a twin tail, if you're in a situation where whatever reason you feel like the bite's slow, the fish is preferring a slower fall, you can simply go from a frog type trailer to a twin tail and slow down the fall of your bait. Sometimes it makes a big difference. Swim jigs. Basically two types of trailers that I use. I use the twin tail almost all the time. Every now and then I'll go to a little swim bait trailer, and that also works very well, where you get that paddle tail action. But the twin tail is my number one go-to trailer. I'll use the pearl on my shad colored swim jig, and on my bluegill colored swim jig I'll use a green pumpkin twin tail. And there's very few situations that I have run across that these combinations don't work. So you got your old style number 11 frogs that you need to purchase. Green pumpkin works in almost every situation. And then you got some twin tails. And you see I keep my colors simple. Black and blue, and generally some version of brown, and or green pumpkin. And then on my swim jigs I'm using a shad color and a bluegill pattern. Works for me, probably work for you too. So just a little jig 101, real simple. 4 styles of jigs. Literally I use a couple of styles of trailers, and I'll be honest with you, I've not been in a situation yet where these wouldn't work, and I'm sure they'll work for you. Alright folks, that's some quick jig tips and jigs and trailers. Keep it simple, it's not too difficult, and they do catch a lot of fish. So if you're not a jig fisherman, I recommend you trying them. They are amazing. One of my most favorite ways of fishing these days is a swim jig. I throw it everywhere people would normally throw a spinnerbait. A little more subtle, actually a lot more subtle, and the fish are really liking it. So thank you for watching, folks. I don't know about y'all, but I've got it bad. I'm TODD CRONIC. Thank you for watching Chronic Fishing.